Hello, this is Robin Yergubian, and I'm a counselor in the Transfer Center at Santa Rosa Junior College. Today we're going to be talking about the UC Personal Insight questions, specifically for the Fall 2019 application cycle. To begin, and I know you're doing this on your own, I would take a step away from the prompts if you already have them in front of you, and just do sort of a free-write brainstorming activity. And the questions I want you to address first would be, what do you want universities to know about you? Independent of everything you have on your application already, what's something that's important for them to know? It can be a few things, but focusing on one or two would be a good place to start. Then I'd like you to think about considering what's already on your application. We're already covering your grades, your coursework, activities. What's missing? What's missing from your application that will provide a lot of good information or context to how you did earn those grades or how you selected the major you did? And now we want to address what is really the purpose of writing the insight questions. A school is going to want to know, of course, your academic record and what you've done outside of the classroom to support your academic record, but they're also very interested to know all the things that make you you. This is something we refer to as holistic review. They're looking at your character, perhaps leadership if you do have it, experiences that have shaped you, how you've learned and grown from situations. And when we write our essays, we want to always ask ourselves, am I adding value to my application as a whole? Are they learning something that is useful in assessing who I am, not just academically, but as a person? And with that in mind, the goal here is really just to tell your story. For all four of your essays, you're telling us your story, what has helped you develop into who you are. And so part of that can include extracurricular activities, employment, any research you've done, what your living situation or home environment is. And it gives us context into your academic record. When we're looking into context, we mean what kind of experiences or circumstances might be at play to give the full picture of your academic record. For example, if you have a big gap in your education, maybe you took a 5-year break from school, you might want to explain that because it helps us understand how your academic record formed over the years. Perhaps you started out your schooling and your first couple of terms were not the strongest in terms of a GPA, but you've increased it since. There's definitely a story there. Maybe you learned coping strategies or your life circumstances changed. Anything that might make a reader go, I wonder what happened there. You're going to want to explain, and it can be in these insight questions that you do that, or in the extra box they provide at the end of your academic record or at the end of the entire application where you can just add more info. Another thing to keep in mind is that you may have had a 4.0 in one term, but there was a lot of personal struggle happening behind the scenes that a reader would know. And you're going to want to explain that. I may have a 4.0, but I need to let you know that I was sick all of this semester and I worked really, really hard in these specific ways to keep my GPA at that level. And now moving on, let's get more specific. So what are these questions? You have to write 4 responses in total. One of them is required, and that has to do with your major, where the other 3 you may select out of 7 possible questions. Each of the 4 responses will allow you to write 350 words or less on. You don't have to fill up all the way to 350 words. That is just a maximum per response. And it is important to know that aside from that one required major-related question, every single question there on out is of equal value. You're not going to be penalized. You're not going to have an advantage choosing one or the other. So just go in and answer each question honestly. Which one really allows you to show, again, that holistic person? I mentioned that major is important. It is critical. You have to write on it, and they're going to want to know how you've prepped. So let's take a look at that question specifically. And now to look at the question specifically. Here's the first of the prompts. This one is the required one regarding your major. It is, please describe how you have prepared for your intended major, including your readiness to succeed in your upper division courses once you enroll at the university. The way most students seem to interpret this one is a sense of, I need to back up my record and show that I have strong grades in my major classes. And they have all of your information already. Remember, courses and grades are included in the transcript section, so you don't want to be redundant. You want to, again, add value, something new. So these little prompts have been developed to support that, and these come straight from the UC. Some things you're going to ask yourself is, how did this interest start? Why this major and not the other? Where did that begin? What experiences have you had inside the classroom or outside of the classroom that sort of support your love of this program? Any kind of influences, culturally, community-wise, family, that have pushed you toward this major? And then lastly, how is this connected to your long-term goals? Do you see some particular career field or goal in your future? And they're not going to hold you to this, but if you do have that in mind, you can certainly develop that concept more. You do not have to answer all of these little prompts in addressing the larger question, but they do help you get started to know that it's not just about saying, hey, I got all A's in all my psych classes as a psych major. You're going to want to go deeper than that. Some additional tips on that. If you don't have any experience to discuss regarding your major outside of the classroom, it's okay to talk about classroom experiences. Maybe you have a special project, you worked with faculty or students, had a specific experience within the classroom, so maybe some research that can support that. The next piece is that if you are applying with a different major at multiple campuses, rather than picking your specific major, talk a little bit about the broader field. So if that means maybe you're in the realm of math science, talk about the importance of that, but be specific. And then keep in mind, you might really want to get into, let's say, UCLA, but unless you're just applying to UCLA, you're going to want to make sure that you're comfortable with every UC campus to which you're applying, reading these essays, meaning you're not going to talk all about UCLA knowing that Irvine's going to get this application. Typically, you're wanting to make sure that you're not focusing on one campus. So now that we've covered the major required question, you need to select 3 more, and they can be from any of these 7 here. I would recommend pausing the video and looking over them to get an idea of what they're asking for. But as a quick sort of rundown, we have leadership, creativity, a talent or skill, any educational opportunity or program or educational barrier you've gotten through, a challenge of some kind that you've learned and grown from, and if you've made your community a better place. And then this one's kind of the catch-all, what sets you apart? So if it wasn't covered in these prompts, chances are it would probably be captured here. Let's talk about question 1. This is asking you about leadership, if you've influenced others or contributed to a group. What would be effective here is telling specifically, how did you take the lead? Do you have an example you can talk about? We really want to get specific, but because we only have 350 words, 1 or 2 is plenty. It can be in the home, it can be at work, it can be in the classroom. Leadership is not just clubs or student body president. If you are running a household or you are taking care of maybe a family member, there's a lot of leadership in that. You're going to want to try to connect it to your major if at all possible. Something less effective would be if you're talking only about some other person. This is just a pitfall through all the essays. If your influencer in your major is your grandfather, maybe they were in a similar career field, and that's influenced you, that's all well and good, but the essay's not about your grandfather. So you're going to want to make sure that if you reference somebody else, make it very brief and make it immediately connect to you and your growth. And that would be relevant here as a leadership prompt as well. Moving to prompts 2 and 3. This prompt, number 2, addresses creativity. So if you are creative in any way, discuss it. It does not have to be in terms of art or music or sort of the cliche ways we think of creativity. It can be in science and engineering because you're problem solving. If you are able to be a problem solver in a social situation, you've shown some innovation at work, or you just created something new, that would be effective. Less effective is probably a completely unrelated activity or a hobby that doesn't connect to your major or your career. remember, some humans reading these essays, they're going to want to understand, how does this connect to your bigger application? This is the major and career path you're choosing. So how would this hobby or activity connect back as well? Or experience. It can be something small. Number 3 is your greatest talent or skill. And the key here is to address how it was developed and demonstrate over time. That's the important piece. How did you stick with it and develop it further to a deeper level? Effective? That would be probably something a little bit more recent than high school. So is it something that you still use today? If it started when you were 10 years old, that's fine, but how has it developed further and really affected your life today? You're also going to want to make sure that you are very specific. I like this piece here. Succinct details are better. You're not going to want to be really vague about your talent or skill, like, I have good people skills. You're going to want to tell me an actual story or time when you demonstrated those people skills and then connect them back to maybe that application as a whole. Number 4 talks a little bit about a significant educational opportunity. So that can be perhaps a program you've taken advantage of. Here at SRJC we have Puente, APAS, Emoja, Connections, CalWorks, if you've been a part of any of those programs or anything outside of school. Another piece would be, is there an academic or educational barrier you have faced? Perhaps you have a learning difference and you've learned coping strategies and skills to be able to work with that. So it can be an opportunity or a barrier. And here are some examples of opportunities. So preparation programs or internships, if you've gone abroad, any community service. And then if you'd like to focus on a barrier instead, maybe you have a really, really long drive. Those things definitely take a toll on how your schooling is approached. If you've had a traumatic event or a medical challenge that's impacted your academics, family circumstances, working full-time, 40 hours, with any kind of coursework, that's a lot. You're going to want to discuss how you've worked through that. Again, it's growing, moving through things, meeting the challenge, moving through it, an undiagnosed or severe learning difference, and finances. You're going to want to just make sure that whatever you discuss, you mention how you learned from it. Question number 5 is somewhat similar in that you will discuss a challenge, but this one's a little bit broader than just an academic challenge. You're going to talk about anything in your life, academic or not, that has had an effect on you. And if you can relate that back to your academic achievement, so despite this challenge, look how I'm achieving academically, or let me tell you why I've had some trouble achieving academically. Anything that, again, provides context. So an effective essay would talk a little bit about how that challenge has impacted your academics and who you are today. How have you grown and learned from it? This word shaped, that's really important. How has it shaped who you are today? And these are just examples of what you can discuss. It can be anything, and I wouldn't shy away from any topic. So just some examples here if you want to pause and take a look through that. What would be less effective is if you discuss this obstacle, but not tell us how you've grown from it. Tell us the story and get specific, but the most important part, again, is how has it shaped you? And this one is set up to be a pitfall if you choose to talk about somebody else, and maybe it's relevant to your story, but make sure that if you are discussing, let's just say, you've had some trauma within your family, you can discuss that, but it really has to be about you. It can't be about, again, the family member or the friend. It has to relate back to you. Here are the last 2 you have to choose from. Number 6 is how have you made your community a better place? This one's pretty straightforward. Just keep in mind it doesn't have to be big, huge impact. It can be something small because it's going to point out your character. And if you did do some sort of effort with a group, make sure that you are addressing your specific role. I know we always want to give credit to our group members. That seems really ethical. And you are, if you mention it was part of a group, but then immediately focus on what your contribution was, because we want added value around your story and not, again, somebody else's story. What would not be effective for number 6, if you choose to write on it, is probably not citing a very clear example of how you made your community a better place. And you obviously don't want to take all the credit, but you want it to basically tell us how you made some change specifically. Number 7, this is the last one that asks, how are you different? How are you a strong candidate to UC? You can put all sorts of things here. One example might be that you speak several languages. And you can see how these can move between the prompts. That might be your greatest talent or skill. If you moved a lot and you were able to be very flexible, that's something you could put here. These are just random examples. Maybe military service belongs here. Something effective would be something the university does not know. So something brand new that really adds more context. You could also talk about why you would like to do the UC, why now, what are you especially proud about? That again is not in any other section. But what you want to be careful of, not as effective, is reiterating points you've already addressed. So if you've already told us about it, it's covered. You have this one extra section here to tell us something new, and that's what you're going to want to do. Another piece is don't be general in this. If I can throw somebody else's name on your essay, it's too general, it's too broad. You're going to want to make sure that I should be able to pick this up and knowing you say, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. It has to be that specific. Otherwise, it's not really taking advantage of this opportunity to tell the university something more. Now that we've reviewed all the prompts, let's get into some final tips that relate to all of them. Although it might seem a little strange to use somewhat of a casual voice in these, it is more of a creative writing assignment rather than an essay, even though I do keep using that word. They've actually changed it to personal insight questions, and they don't use the word essay. And so with that, I want you to know I is okay in terms of starting your sentences or throughout your essays. I've come to learn this. It's okay. Contractions are all right as well. This is not a formal English paper or academic paper. Although it needs to be proofed, of course, that's going to be really important, and polished, it can have sort of a casual voice. And one way to ensure that you've done that, you've captured your own voice, is once it's been written, hand it to somebody you know and trust, somebody that really does know you, probably outside of an academic setting, and say, does this sound like me? Because if it doesn't, you're probably trying to write in this college essay sort of way. Of course you would, because this can feel like an intimidating process. I want you to try to let go of that and really try to get to the root of who you are, what your voice sounds like. With that in mind, I said it has to be proofed. We're not going to want errors, of course, so you're going to go through many drafts. Start early. It does take a longer time to cut things back, and you have a 350-word limit per essay. Per question. And the way to do that is by utilizing the Writing Center and coming to a Transfer Center UC essay workshop, and that will help you tailor your essays a little bit better if needed and brainstorm if needed. This is kind of a strange point here, but I want to take a little time talking about it. Essays are read in a predetermined order. They're going to see the major essay first, and then they're going to see them in order of how they're listed in my presentation or on the website in terms of the 7 other prompts you can pick from. And so that's important because if you are telling me a story, an elongated story maybe in prompt 7, but you reference it very, very briefly in, let's say you pick prompt 2, I'm going to read prompt 2 first without knowing I'm going to get all the info in 7 when you go to write that one. And I might get a little lost in prompt 2, like what is the student talking about? They reference something that sounds kind of big, but I don't know what it is. You might need to give a little bit more information in prompt 2, part with some words that I know are valuable with 350 total, to just give me context so you don't lose me as a reader. I know what's going on, and then you can expand on it in number 7. You don't want to be redundant, but you might need to add a little bit more so you don't lose the reader. And then as you address just the overall focus of each of these prompts, if it has to do with something maybe on your end resembling a mistake, it's okay. It's okay if you have a mistake. It's very human. Humans are reading these things. They know this. And the important part is to, mention how you've learned from this error or mistake. One more point on value added. What is this? So it addresses your interest in the field. It's connecting back to extracurricular preparation for the major. You're reflecting on past experiences in preparation for upper division courses. So looking at those pieces, that's what we're going to look at when we say, what is value added? There you have it. We've gone over all the prompts and some general tips around how to approach these essays or insight questions, and we look forward to seeing you in the Transfer Center if you need further support. Best of luck.